It finally happened to you. You're working a transaction and then suddenly you get a tidewater notice. In today's video, we're going to be talking about what happens when the appraisal comes in low. Specifically, we're going to be talking about VA appraisals. Hey, I'm Frank Kritzman, real estate agent in Northwest Florida, and I was able to kick my job in the military and go real estate full time. And so now I just want to help people succeed in real estate. I'm out here sharing everything I know so that hopefully you can save a little bit of time and not take so long to get things started like I did. All right, without further ado, let's get into it talking about VA appraisals. The first thing to know is that a low VA appraisal is just kind of an inevitability. It's going to happen at some point, and it's not a big deal. It's just all part of the real estate game. It is going to happen, so don't be afraid of it. Make sure you prep your clients for it being a possibility, but you just need to know what to do next. Having a low VA appraisal is more common where prices are rising because that appraised price doesn't have time to catch up with the sold comps from 2-3 months ago. Over the last 6 months, where prices have kind of stalled and dipped a lot in a lot of markets, those VA appraisals have been pretty much coming in all on point, but there was a time in 2021 when all the prices were going up crazy. In like a 12-month span, there was probably 20 of my transactions that ended up being low appraisals. Okay, so here's what happens. When you're in the transaction, your lender is going to order the appraisal. Now, the timeline is going to differ per individual area. Like in my specific area, that appraiser has 10 days to give the report back from the time that that appraisal was ordered. Usually I start getting that bad feeling in my stomach around day 9 or 10 because I just am getting that feeling that something's going to happen. And what will happen is that lender is going to give you what's called a tidewater notice. And a tidewater notice is just a notification that the VA appraisal came in low. Now what happens after that is that both sides of the transaction are going to try to find comps to defend that contract price. Usually the listing agent has a little bit more of an incentive to really dig deep and try to find those comps because that listing agent is going to be trying to get the most amount of money for their seller. On the buyer side, not all buyer's agents are particularly motivated to find comparable homes to try to defend that price because one of the big possibilities is that price coming down. So their buyer could end up getting the house for a little bit less if that appraisal does come in low. Now, when the tidewater notice comes in, that doesn't mean that the appraisal is closed out yet. It just means that the appraiser did not come to a value that meets the contract price. They are not going to say what that value is. All you know is that it is a little bit low and they're asking everybody to send in their comparables and try to defend that contract price. That whole process of digging for comps has always kind of annoyed me because I always felt that the VA appraisers are just kind of asking other people to do their job. But it's all part of the process. They have to do it, so that's what happens. So they'll reach out. Everybody will send in their comparables. Usually that takes like 2 or 3 days. And then the appraiser is going to review those comps that the listing agent or the buyer's agent have sent in, and they're going to take a second look at everything. Then they will make a decision on their final number for the value on the appraisal. When that final number comes in and the appraisal is still low, there are 5 possibilities that can happen after that. Now, yes, there could be more, but these are the 5 most likely scenarios that are going to happen when that appraisal comes in low. Now, a low appraisal really puts everybody in a bind because that buyer is not going to be able to get approved for that amount of funds to buy the house. So let's say for this example that the contract price was $400,000 and the VA appraisal comes back and say the appraisal comes back at $380,000. Well, that buyer is not going to be able to get any funding over $380,000 to buy that house. So they're either going to have to cover the difference in cash or something. But on the flip side of that, now that VA appraisal is going to be in the appraisal system for like 6 months. So if you're on the listing side of that and that low appraisal comes back and it really upsets your seller, which definitely is something that could happen, make sure you let your seller know that that VA appraisal is going to sit in that Make sure you let your seller know that that VA appraisal is going to sit in the appraisal system for about 6 months. So if they were just to cancel and try to find somebody new and just cross your fingers and pray that that second appraisal comes in higher, there's a good chance that that next appraiser is going to look at the old appraisal and they're probably just going to agree with that old appraisal. So more times than not, the best scenario for both parties, buyer and seller, is going to be coming into some kind of agreement on that contract. If I were you, I would do your best to try to keep that deal alive. All right, so here's the 5 things that could happen. The first one is that the seller agrees to drop that purchase price down to the VA appraised amount. So in this scenario, it would be the 380, right? So seller agrees to just drop the price from 400 to 380, and you do a price change addendum, and then you just push forward, everything's good. Second scenario is the buyer to some degree covers the amount in cash. Maybe they split the difference. A scenario you might have is the buyer and the seller agree to maybe 390, like they split the difference, but the buyer agrees to pay that extra 10,000 difference in cash. This again was very, very popular in 2021 and 2022. It was called the appraisal gap. So tons of offers we were writing around that time had appraisal gap coverage. Like they would say that they were offering $350,000 on this house, willing to pay up to $10,000 over appraised amount with cash. The third scenario that can happen is that either party can choose to terminate the contract and you can just move on. And at that point, if either party cancels, they are not going to be defaulting on that contract. For the buyer to cancel without a default, you don't even necessarily need an appraisal contingency for that offer, as long as the time that appraisal comes back is inside the financing contingency on the offer. The fourth thing that can happen is what's called a reconsideration of value, and this is when you reach out to the VA appraiser directly and just ask them, hey, we think that there's been an error here. We would like you to reconsider the value that you came to on this appraisal. And from my experience and what I've seen, this has a very, very low rate of success. So if you do get one to work out, that would be great. But chances are the appraiser is just going to be like, oh yeah, I'll reconsider the value. And then they just give you the same number they gave you before. So good luck with that. The fifth thing you can do is actually get the buyer to write a letter directly to the VA. So this kind of goes around that specific appraiser, and you get the buyer to, write this big sob story about why they need the house and the reasoning for why they think the appraised amount was higher than the appraisal. And you write up this sob story letter and you send it up to the VA and somebody reads it. And I've actually heard a lot of success back with that was actually an effective method of increasing that appraised amount. If you have any other questions about VA appraisals, make sure you put them down in the comments and I'll do my best to answer them.